a significant shift in unsold condo inventory in Metro Vancouver by 2025.
That's right.
And we want to unpack what that could actually mean for home prices, maybe even this year.
Yeah, it's a pretty striking projection. We're talking about a potential 60% surge in the inventory of completed but unsold condos by the end of next year, 2025.
60%. Wow. Can you put some numbers on that?
Sure. So the projection suggests a rise from about 2,179 completed units currently up to potentially 3,493 units.
Okay.
And importantly, this forecast already factors in expected sales around 1,500 homes based on, current absorption rates and when projects are likely to finish up.
Right. So even accounting for ongoing sales, we're looking at a big jump. Let's break that down. What are the main things driving this predicted increase in unsold units?
Yeah.
Well, it's really a combination of factors playing out. First off, borrowing costs. While, yes, the Bank of Canada rates have started to come down a bit.
Which is good news, generally.
It is long-term, maybe, but in the near term, the demand for ownership condos specifically is still expected to be, well, somewhat weak. People are still feeling the pinch from those higher rates.
Okay, so demand is soft. What else?
Second, there's just a very high number of homes currently under construction across the region. A lot of projects got started earlier.
Right.
And third, linked to that, we're expecting a big wave of these projects to actually reach completion during 2025.
Yeah.
So lots more units hitting the market.
So, okay, more supply coming online just as buyer demand isn't quite strong enough to sort of soak it all up immediately.
Exactly. That's the dynamic.
And I guess having all those completed unsold condos sitting there, that must create some headaches for the developers themselves.
Oh, absolutely. When developers hold a large inventory of unsold units, their carrying costs go up. Things like interest on loans, property taxes, maintenance, it all adds up. And that increased cost can definitely make them maybe more hesitant to start new projects down the road. It ties up capital.
Okay, this is where it gets really crucial, I think. If this forecast holds true, this big jump in unsold inventory, what are the potential consequences? What could it mean for the market, especially for prices, maybe even sooner rather than later?
Well, the most direct potential consequence is more downward pressure on prices. It's basic supply and demand, really.
Right.
When there's a larger pool of unsold homes, developers often become more motivated to, shall we say, adjust their pricing strategies to move that inventory.
Have we seen this before, like in past cycles?
Yeah, if you look back at previous times when unsold inventory spiked like this, we generally saw price corrections follow. Now, obviously, other economic factors are always at play.
Of course.
But it provides a historical parallel. Beyond just prices, though, this kind of shift could also change how housing needs get met, maybe creating different kinds of opportunities for buyers, but also potentially for renters, depending on how developers respond.
So potentially more rental availability if condos don't sell.
It's a possibility. The key takeaway here is that 2025 could genuinely see the highest level of unsold condo inventory we've experienced in Metro Vancouver for quite some time. Years, potentially.
That definitely feels like it could be a significant turning point. Now, the info you shared also mentioned overall housing starts. What's the bigger picture there?
Yeah, that's another really interesting piece of the puzzle, because overall, housing starts actually hit record highs in 2023, over 33,000 units.
Wow.
And they stayed really strong in 2024, over 28,000. But, and this is the key part.
Okay.
When you dig into what kind of housing is being started, it's overwhelmingly driven by secured purpose-built rentals.
So not condos for sale, but buildings specifically designed as rentals from the get-go.
Exactly. We saw over 10,000 purpose-built rental starts in each of the last 2 years. Huge number.
Why the big shift towards purpose-built rentals then?
We'll contrast that with ownership housing starts, condos and townhouses primarily. That trend is actually going down. In 2024, ownership units were only 63% of total starts.
Which sounds like a lot,
But
right?
it's actually the second lowest share since way back in 1990. Put it this way. Purpose-built rental starts last year were 59% higher than the 10-year average, while ownership starts were 21% below that same average.
That's a massive divergence.
It really is, and it strongly suggests that the sustained demand for rentals reflects, well, the serious affordability challenges in the ownership market. Owning a place in Vancouver is just out of reach for a growing number of people.
Yeah, that paints a very clear picture. The information also talked about condo investors, didn't it? Their role seems to be changing too.
And this is absolutely crucial for understanding the market dynamics, especially on the rental side historically.
How so?
For years, individual investors buying condos and then renting them out were a massive source of rental supply here. Like since 2007, they accounted for something like 79% of all new rental supply coming online.
79%, that's huge.
It really drove a lot of the rental market. But lately, we've seen a really sharp pullback from that group.
A pullback. How significant?
Well, looking at new projects being marketed, the share of buyers identified as investors has dropped by about half, 50% in just the past year or so.
Wow.
It brings their activity levels back down to where they were around 2019, maybe 2020.
Okay, a 50% drop in investor buying.
Yeah.
What's causing them to step back so dramatically?
It seems to be a perfect storm of factors, really. High interest rates are a big one. Obviously makes borrowing more expensive, eats into potential returns.
Right.
Then you've got new government policies, things related to taxation, new rules around short-term rentals like Airbnb.
The speculation tax, empty homes tax.
Exactly. Plus changes to tenancy laws. It all creates more uncertainty and potentially lower profitability for landlords and just general economic caution, you know.
So all these things are making being a condo investor less attractive right now.
That seems to be the case. And this drop in investor demand is a direct reason why the presale market has been sluggish.
Explain pre-sales quickly.
Presales are when developers sell units in a project before it's even built, or sometimes while it's under construction.
And investors were big pre-sale buyers.
Historically, yes. So with fewer investors buying, presale transactions have dropped. They went from about 11,500 in 2023 down to under 10,000 in 2024.
And potentially lower still in 2025.
That's the concern. Right now, across the whole region, there are something like 16,000 total unsold new homes, including those still under construction.
And pre-sales are really important for developers getting projects built in the first place, aren't they? For financing.
Critically important, yeah. Lenders often require developers to hit certain presale targets before they'll release the construction financing. It shows market demand.
So if pre-sales are slow,
it makes it harder to get projects funded and started. Recognizing this, the provincial regulator, the BC Financial Services Authority, actually brought in measures to help. They ran a pilot program, now made permanent in a modified way, to extend the time developers have to market projects early on.
Giving them more runway to hit those targets.
Essentially, yes. First to 12 months and then a pilot for 18 months for very large projects. But even with those changes, the underlying pressures, high rates, policy shifts, investor caution, they're still pushing up that unsold inventory number.
It really sounds like a complex web of factors, and we probably shouldn't ignore the wider economic picture either, right? Any sort of bigger headwinds.
Yeah, definitely worth keeping in mind. If you zoom out, Canada's overall economic fundamentals have faced some challenges recently. There are concerns about global trade tensions maybe impacting us here. And the labor market, while still relatively okay on the surface, has shown some signs of, let's say, concern underneath. Plus, recent changes to federal immigration policies might mean slower population growth for Metro Vancouver than we've historically seen.
Right, which could also affect housing demand long-term.
Potentially, yes. It adds another layer of uncertainty to the outlook.
Okay, so let's try and bring it all together then for everyone listening. It really sounds like we're potentially looking at a pretty significant pileup of unsold condos in Metro Vancouver heading into 2025.
The core forecast, yeah.
And it's not just one single cause, but this mix of kind of weaker demand for ownership units right now. A large pipeline of construction finishing up.
Right.
And this really noticeable pullback by condo investors.
That sums it up well. It's those converging trends.
And the potential ripple effects are pretty major. Continued downward pressure on prices seems like a real possibility.
It does, based on the supply dynamics.
And maybe a further shift in the whole housing landscape with, as you said, perhaps more focus inevitably shifting towards purpose-built rentals if condos aren't moving as quickly.
That certainly seems to be the direction things are moving in terms of what's getting built right now.
So it leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? Given this potential major shift, this big increase in unsold inventory, how might that actually reshape housing affordability and maybe even the types of developments we see in Metro Vancouver over the next few years?
It's the key question, isn't it? What are the longer-term implications for the region's housing future?
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.